Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Mountaineer Locker Room Then and Now. I'm Greg Crist, your host for tonight's show. I'll be joined here shortly by the other two hosts, Mickey Plumley and, of course, Frank Fear. We thank you for joining us again here on a Wednesday night, and we hope that, as always, we beg you for likes and subscribes and all those sorts of things on YouTube. That really helps us out when you do that. So hit that like and subscribe button. And pass that on to your friends and family and everybody that you know. Hey, just go on and like and subscribe. It helps us out a great deal. You don't necessarily have to watch the show if you don't want to listen to all this hot air. You can just subscribe and move on. But we do encourage you to do that. We think you'll enjoy the show. We try each week to bring you interesting topics and interesting folks. And you know, it's the time of year when we say, well, there's not a whole lot going on. What will we talk about? But there is a lot going on, and it seems like every week there's just more and more happening in Mountaineer world, and we're thrilled to be a part of it, and we love talking about it. We encourage you to input with us. You can comment on the screen, ask questions, make comments, whatever you'd like to do. Frank can put those up on the screen where everybody can see them, so we encourage all of our viewers to do that. We appreciate that interaction, and we don't claim to be experts on all this. We just claim to be enthusiasts, and we follow it closely, and we enjoy talking about it. So I know a lot of you all out there are the same way. You just don't, you may not have the live stream set up, but go ahead and comment and make your comments to us and ask your questions, whatever you'd like to do. We appreciate it. We got several things we're going to talk about tonight. Of course, we want to wrap up the basketball that finally ended this week. We'll wrap up our talks on that. Darryl won't be with us tonight. He had an earlier commitment he has to attend to. So it'll just be us three talking about it. Of course, we won't, again, we're not experts, so we don't get into the deep stuff on it. We'll just give you our observations of it. I'm sure a lot of folks have the same observations watching the men's and the women's Final Four and championship game over the weekend and Monday. We look forward to talking about that. WVU football, full spring practice is on tap right now. Coach Brown has had press conference. I had one today. He has, we thought 1 week, but apparently doing a little more. He had another one today. So we're going to talk about his press conference, some of the things that stood out to us, some of the highlights of that press conference. Very interesting and informative. And always, if you're a Mountaineer fan, fun to listen to. We have also Randy Flinchum is going to be with us tonight. Randy, of course, as you know from shows past, he'll be on to talk to us about some of the transfer stuff, some of the guys that are having impact already that have transferred in. And we look forward to hearing from Randy. Frank interviewed him and recorded that, and he's going to load that on tonight during the show so we can listen to Randy's comments about the newcomers and what's going on out there in Portal World. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and bring Frank and Mickey in to the show. Welcome, fellas.
Hey, good to see both of you guys.
Hey, good evening, Greg. Good evening, Frank.
Good evening, Mickey. And we welcome both you guys in. And like I was saying in the opening monologue here, we have a ton of stuff going on, even though it is springtime. We got basketball, we've got baseball, football, everything going on. I know we worry about what are we going to talk about? What's our topic's going to be? It's springtime and nobody's playing, but there's a lot going on, and a lot going on even in basketball here. We still have coaches being hired, players transferring in and out, and all that stuff's taking place now. And I think we'll continue to heat up now that the season's officially over. And I think it's going to be interesting for us to watch Coach DeVries and his coaching staff that he's going to bring in, who he's bringing in, and then some of the players that we've talked about. And guys, I'll let you all jump in here. But one thing that I've heard and up here in Morgantown, and also noticed just from watching, is that in the past when there were your top 15, 20 players in that portal, we were out there with all of them, talking to them, et cetera, et cetera. And I heard a discussion on the radio the other day about DeVries' philosophy is he wants people that are going to fit. He wants a fit for the program, the cultural fit. All those things are so important to him. And I know in the past, just here recently, we went out and signed the best porter class in the country. thing didn't work out. But that was a different philosophy. Let's just go get the best players and try to blend them together. I think Coach Cal at Kentucky, that was his philosophy: get the best people you can get and try to mold them into something good and then move them on to the next level. But I think Coach DeVries is taking a little different approach. I think he's being more selective with the portal. I think he's working. I'm sure they're talking to people all the time. We just don't know about it. But I think he's working toward getting people that's going to fit his style. What do you think, Frank?
Oh, I think you're absolutely correct. And we'll talk about this later, but that's exactly what Coach Brown said in his press conference last, I think it was the 3rd or the 4th. And it really makes a lot of sense. I think the more you are clear about your philosophy and what you want to do, you know how important it is to have as Brown was saying, a checklist of characteristics you look for. And he was very clear in his press conference. They've gone the other way and have been burned by it. And so I think it's wise.
And you know, one of the things I heard talk, and again, this is just hearing somebody else talk about it. I don't know if they know any more about it than we do or if they have other information, but the talk I heard was that one of the first things he does is contact their parents and finds out where their parents come from, what their lifestyle is, what the socioeconomic status, I guess, all those things, and rolled into one so you can figure out more about the type of kids you're going to get. And I thought that was pretty interesting, the fact that he would take that approach. I think that's a good approach. I've learned throughout my time on earth and my career that you see, a lot of coaches come from coaches. You see a lot of players come from players. You see work ethic, you see morals, you see character. You see all those type of things when a person comes from that type of person, if that makes sense. I know, my case with my oldest son, with me every step of the way when I was coaching, went to practices from the time he was 6 and has become a wonderful coach. And I think that, it's not because of my knowledge or anything, because if that were the case, he would be doing something else, probably hard labor somewhere. But it's because he was around it. He saw it. He saw what was involved. He saw how it worked. He watched all this intently. And I think because of that, he's become a good coach. So I think, you've heard success breeds success. So I'm guessing that's his philosophy, is that we need to find good people that have kids that are good kids, in a nutshell. Okay. So, Mickey, I don't know your thoughts on that, but you can go ahead.
I think what we're talking about here, both coaches, DeVries and Brown, have stressed the fact that we want to build a culture and we want to attract kids that are comfortable and buy in to that culture. Otherwise, I think the propensity for them to leave you is a lot higher. You take a kid who's very proud of the state of West Virginia, whether he lives here or not, but recognizes, the culture of the state, the work ethic of the people of the state, the fact that there aren't any professional sports teams in the state. So, these State University and Marshall, I have to throw Marshall in there, are the two big attractions for everybody in the state. So I think you look for people who have an appreciation for that fact. When you talk about culture, you also got to talk about, the heritage of West Virginia, and the coal miners, the blue collar ethic. And Frank, early on when you were working on your book, Band of Brothers Then and Now, Dickie Roberts said repeatedly the reason he came to West Virginia University was, first of all, he wanted to play for his state. And secondly, he wanted to play for his family. And third, he wanted to play for the coal miners of the Welch area that he came from. So I think if we can find, kids today that have that sort of mentality, that sort of value system, which probably the reason he's speaking to their parents is to find out, what kind of culture, what kind of values have those parents instilled, in that kid, and is it a good fit for the type of program that both coaches are attempting to fill here. So, I applaud them both rather than just, taking the different piece parts and trying to put together something that you can make a winning team out of. A lot more to be said if you follow this approach. And again, I think you increase your chances greatly of someone staying with you 3, 4, maybe even 5 years if they get redshirted instead of being one and done.
Yep. Last week we listened to Coach DeVries' press conference. I don't know if you guys noticed or not, but it kind of caught my eye. One of the things he said in the press conference was he was going to be meeting with the current players and, seeing where they were at, discussing, his philosophy and that sort of thing. And then ironically, we had one or maybe two jumped in the portal the next week. So I'm guessing that maybe that philosophy and plans didn't really jive so well with a couple of them. So
yeah, well, that's what Darryl predicted, and it makes sense because when I went back to look at the numbers, I saw nine players, one incoming on the roster, and they're not his players, and the one recruit that was signed by Josh and his staff, he's reneged on that offer, and so he's opened up his recruitment. The other thing I would say too, this I think is really important. You talked about the portal. The portal's opening again, and Coach Brown talked about it today. They had one of the news folks there asked him and said, we're going through this really for the first time. I don't know, but you could tell, he's organizing himself, and I'm sure the DeVries is going to do the same thing. You do everything you can to get the right players and everything you can to keep them here so they're not looking, but they may look and they may receive offers they can't turn down. So we're just going to have to see. But I'm tickled we've got two great coaches.
I think so. Yep, I think so. And I think the as far as the portal and all that, I think that it's here to stay and it's going to happen. And I think the good thing I'm seeing is they have kind of figured out. I think Coach Brown kind of has a much better grip on what he did when he first started. And I think that Coach DeVries has already experienced it and has a grip on it. So I think we're in good shape right there. I think it's going to work out just fine. And I know people get all upset when somebody leaves, but a couple things you can't. In today's climate, you can't really take that as a personal shot at WVU because somebody decides to leave. There's money out there. There's people talking to them. There's all kinds of factors that go into those decisions, I'm sure. I'm sure it's not an easy decision, but there's a lot of stuff that goes into that and into the portal and people transfer and that sort of thing. So, I feel confident that they've got it figured out, hopefully. We wanted to talk a little bit about March Madness that ended up this weekend, the women's Final Four and championship game. South Carolina knocked off Iowa. And I'll put them together and we'll give our thoughts on both of them. And of course, in the men's game, you had UConn. They defeated Purdue. Pretty good basketball games, and both of them were good games. I thought the women's game, I predicted that UConn might win that thing just because of their experience and the number of times they've been there. But I watched South Carolina play for a little bit, and I realized why they were undefeated and why nobody was going to beat them because they're pretty good. The thing I noticed about South Carolina is they have more than just one really good player. And I think that, I think they just wore Iowa down with their tenacity and their defense and chasing them around all over the place. And they were good enough, offensively. They got the big girl inside, could score. And, I think they held Clark in check pretty well for most of the game. She did end up, I think, with 30 or somewhere in that neighborhood, but they made it tough on her. She worked for every single one of them. As far as the men's game was concerned, I had my son and I had talked about that game, and I said, it's going to be interesting to watch Eddie, I think is the way you pronounce his name, Zach Edey, and Klingen, I think is the way you pronounce the kid from UConn. I said, it's going to be interesting to watch those two match up. Now, I thought the kid from UConn, he negated DJ Brown in that Final Four game. And I thought that was huge. He pretty much held him in check. He didn't do much. And then and had a little different philosophy. It seemed like I think they felt like they probably couldn't stop Zach Edey straight up, so they were just going to guard him straight up and shut everybody else down. And that's exactly what they did. He got his, I think, 37. The rest of the team had 23. And watching UConn, man, what a basketball team! They are so good. And you're sitting there watching. I don't know how many games I watched. I watched every game they played in the March Madness except for the first one. And you sit there and you watch them, and they're up by 4. The game's back and forth, and then you look up and they're up by 12, just like that. And that same thing happened to Purdue. They hit a couple threes. Next thing you know, they're up 12, 14 points. Then they just stay steady after that. They never relent, and they don't give in, and the lead never goes any less than that. And I thought they had a great game plan, and I thought it worked to perfection. And I think they are a really good basketball team because they've got 5 or 6 really, really talented players. They're good all the way around. And so I thought the 2 best teams in the country won both the men's and the women's. Frank, what do you think?
Well, I agree with you completely. I had both of those teams in the final. And, if you look at the numbers, those 2 teams went right to form. Klingon, if you look at his stats, points, rebounds, assists, blocks, they were down just a little bit against Edey, but they were right within frame. And then, 3 UConn players play 30 minutes a game. They played 30 minutes a game over the season. Monday night, 5 players played 30 minutes. Over the season, 5 guys for UConn scoring double figures. On Monday night, 4 guys did. And they were one of the best teams in the country in terms of defensive points yielded. 63 points. They gave up 60. And so UConn is a machine. They're a program. They're now a dynasty. They had to replace so many players from last year. And you can say the same thing for USC. I thought the game with Iowa was closer than I thought it would be. But Iowa, give them a lot of credit. They played very hard. Just shows you how much promise we have with the Mountaineer women, because they very easily could have beaten Iowa at Iowa. And that was one of the closest games that Iowa played until the finals. And the thing that stuck out, again, looking at the numbers, was that South Carolina, and I mentioned this last week, number 2 in bench points, 33 points a game. They had 37 on Monday. Iowa had none. That was the game. Their bench came out. They're a team. They're a program. They're a dynasty. And we haven't seen that. To have that on both the men's and the women's side is just amazing. So give them credit. 2 terrific teams.
I think they said, I believe I heard UConn had won 6, I think, national championships in the last, in the mid 90s or early 90s to now. That's pretty amazing. And to do it now, to do back to back now is unbelievable. With the players you lose and all this transferring in and out. Yeah, it's pretty amazing that they're able to do it. Same with South Carolina. It's amazing that they're able to do it in today's climate. Maggie, what was your take on all of it?
Well, UConn, very, very impressive. I had them picked to go all the way. And I believe, if I'm correct, Frank, you're the number 5. Excuse me there. But their average margin of victory in every game they played in the March Madness, I think, was 13 plus points. Yeah. So they beat every team they played by double digits. That's saying something in today's competitive environment. And, I think it speaks also to you either build a team or you build a program. Okay. Clearly, both UConn and South Carolina's got a program that goes on and on and on. The piece parts become interchangeable. You get new players, but the philosophy, the culture, the program continues to go. And I think it sets UConn up to actually have a chance to three-peat next year, because they have a great coach in addition to their coaches, in addition to the players that they have. And on the ladies' side, I want to say hats off to the Lady Mountaineers in their battle against Iowa. Boy, did they play a defensive game against that team. And again, correct me on the numbers if I'm wrong, Frank, but I think that Iowa had been averaging close to 90 points a ball game. And the Lady Mountaineers held them to 67 or 68, I think it was the final score, maybe in the low 70s. But they just played a terrific defensive basketball game. And as you may have seen on social media, one of the very disturbing parts about that game to me was the fact that the number of fouls that were called on Iowa versus the number of fouls that were called on West Virginia. And again, I may not have the exact numbers, but I think there were 17 called on the Mountaineers and 5 called on Iowa. So a little disparity there. I mean, if you balance out that fouling disparity, you got a really, really close ball game. And just hats off to the Lady Mountaineers for doing a great job. And I did see today that I think they finished in the top 25 in women's basketball, being rated the 24th best women's team in the country. So salute to them. It's been a while since that's happened as well.
Absolutely. And yeah, you mentioned those fouls. I look back on that and just think it was more the no calls than the calls, I think, is what I got upset about more than anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I think West Virginia did foul a lot because the type of defense they play, the type of game they play, they're going to foul. But I just felt like there was a lot of calls that were not made, or a lot of plays that they didn't make calls when they probably should have. But I guess, you're going to have that. Of course, that narrative continued right on through to the end. I mean, they were still people complaining about the calls I was getting. I know I had a little bit of a controversy in the UConn game on the last play. And I watched it, and I don't know, it probably was a foul, but the situation, was it a foul that created a wide open shot or anything like that? I don't think so. But yeah, a lot of complaining about that. But yeah, hats off to the Mountaineer women. They did a great job. Frank, before I forget, I noticed you have a nice shirt on tonight, and I can only see the top of it. Maybe you could, there you go. I want to remind everybody, and I don't think I've said it, so I can't remind you, so I'll say it for the first time. We do have a merch shop, and you can go on and buy T-shirts, mugs, different things. We have a couple of Mountaineer Locker Room Then and Now shirts. I got mine, and I was going to wear it tonight, but I got in here so late, didn't have a chance to change into it. But Frank has his on, and you guys can go in. I guess, Frank, do you have a link to that you can put up later on?
Well, it's coming across right there, and I'll put that in the link. And
maybe I should put my glasses on.
Yeah, shout out to Joy Foster. God bless him, who is the executive producer of this network. He's the one who designed it, put it up, and so we really appreciate what you do, Joey, and he made that possible. So
awesome. Yep. Make sure you get on there and check out the Mountaineer Then and Now shirts. That'll be a Mountaineer Locker Room Then and Now shirt. That'll be something probably by the time we're all moved on to another life. Those shirts will be worth a small fortune, I'm guessing.
Yes,
I'm sure they will.
Maybe we can autograph them all and just lay them around, and people can have them when we go. Yeah, I'm sure they're going to be. I'm sure they're going to be real collector's items. All right.
Yeah.
One other thing we want to mention before we get into football is our baseball team, and I know you guys follow and that sort of thing. And I was texting you, Mickey and Frank both the other day watching them. I saw something I'd never seen in a baseball game. I texted and said, West Virginia just hit back-to-back home runs. Then I texted again and said, wait a minute, back-to-back-to-back home runs. Wait a minute, back-to-back-to-back-to-back home runs. They hit 4 home runs in a row. And I'm sure it's happened before. I've never seen that in a game I've watched before. I was amazed. I was like, oh my gosh, how long can this continue? It's kind of relieved when a guy finally made it out. I'm like, all right, we got this over. But Mountaineer's been stroking the ball here the last couple of games. They've gotten the ship right, and that's for sure. And they swept Kansas, and that back-to-back home run game was the last of 3 that they swept. They are now tied for first place in the Big 12. We were talking a week or so ago where they had dropped down to 4th or 5th in the Big 12. Now suddenly they're right back up at the top again. So hats off that Mountaineer baseball team. Again, they swept Kansas, and 8-4 in the conference, 19-12 overall. You see the graphic up there, tied with Oklahoma. And I tell you what, they got a couple key players back Weatherholt for one. And I think it's made a difference in them already. They really seem to be hitting the ball. The only issue I've seen with them so far has been the relief pitching. I think their starting pitching's been good. Their hitting's is coming around now. That relief, the bullpen is a little bit of a struggle right now. They get that fixed, they're going to be a daggone good baseball team, and watch out for them. And they've got UCF coming up this weekend up here in Morgantown. Be nice to sweep through that one as well. That could really put them in the driver's seat in that. Frank, I know you watched. What was your thoughts about the baseball team?
Well, they needed that because you texted me, hey, I just saw back-to-back and then another text 4. And it's true. I mean, they needed those because that was a slugfest. And I think it was 11-9 at the time. But, I mean, who could have predicted this, particularly after they lost 2 out of 3 last week when they should have won? Really, they should have swept Oklahoma State. I'm having trouble, by the way. Mountaineers are playing Marshall in Morgantown as we speak. And for some reason, I'm having trouble getting the ESPN Plus to come up. But I'll see if anybody knows the score. Please let us know, and I'll see if I can because it started at 6:00. So
Frank, Timothy Green is saying that it'd be great if we could all sign an autographed shirt, and he would buy one for sure. But I'll tell you what, Timothy, we'll promise you, you don't have to buy it. We'll get one and sign it for you and send it to you. You get Frank and get your mailing address, and we'll get you a shirt.
There you go.
So, but yeah, you're right. If anybody has that score, keeping up with the Marshall WVU game, let us know.
I'll try. It's still doing it. But I think you're right that having Weatherholt back makes a big difference because he came out of the chutes on Friday, another slugfest that West Virginia won 11-10. He went 3 for 4 with 2 RBIs and hit a home run on Sunday. And then Chumley had 2 home runs on Sunday. And so the thing about UCF, and the reason I put them up on the chart, they're coming up next. I did a comparative analysis of the Big 12. UCF is tough. They're 6th in batting. WVU is 9th, but they're 2nd in pitching, and WVU is 7th because of the relief pitching, as you said. But in fielding, they're 1 and 2. So that's going to be a good series. If West Virginia can take the series 2-1, it really puts them in the driver's seat. And I think Texas Tech comes next.
Yep. I think you're right. And it's going to be a big series, and hope people will turn out for it up here. Mickey, I don't know how much you've gotten to watch, but you got any thoughts on the baseball?
Well, just good to see Weatherholt back. It's a different team when he's in there, and he's not in there. I haven't had an opportunity to watch many of their games this year, so I'd pass on that one, Greg.
I'll tell you what, it's encouraging to watch them now. And of course, they've had spells where they didn't hit real well, but they here lately they've been hitting. And I think Weatherholt been in there. I mean, I know he's a great hitter. Obviously showed that by just coming back and starts hitting as soon as he gets back in the lineup. But I think mentally it probably helps him as well because he's their guy, and he's been out for a long time. And I know getting him back like that, I'm sure, was a big lift to the team. And if they can get a little bit of relief pitching, they're going to be hard to handle because they've got the bats going right now. Starting pitching's been good. And like I said, it's just a bullpen that's hurt them a little bit. But I think if that comes around, and they're going to be hard to handle. I'll tell you that right now. Neal Brown has held a couple press conferences. I've been talking. We've been talking a little bit about spring football. He's had a couple press conferences now concerning the spring. Frank, you and I had talked earlier, but one thing that really stands out, I think, is you can tell that he feels really good about where the team is at right now. He talked about compared to last year's spring, and he talked about the stability. He talked about the depth. He talked about the hard work of the kids and how everything was coming together. He sounds super, super positive to me.
Yeah, I mean, I listened and watched very intently to what he said last week, and caught most of today's press conference. They're halfway through spring. And you and I were talking about it before we went on air. You know, I look at a coach like Neal Brown and just say, this guy knows what he's doing. He's grown into the job, leadership, and just some of the things that he talked about at the press conference. And these weren't in presentation points. These were in responses to questions. And he talked about the selection process for players. They look at three things: character, academics, and athletics. And one of the things he said was, if a kid is tough and has the right attitude, if he's hungry, and if he understands the game, that does make up for that stellar athlete. And then he talked about what they do is avoid, I think it was the BDCE players.
Yeah, heard that.
Pitching, complaining, making excuses, et cetera, denying, and so got to get the D in there. So
yeah, I think he called them palms up players too. Like,
that's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and the thing that he talked about today, which I thought was really important, he said, that offensive line, he said that offensive line is the focal point, because he said we have three goals. We want to be in the nation's top rushing echelon. Got to have an offensive line. We want to make sure we're at the top in terms of the fewest tackles for losses, and we want to be at the top in terms of fewest sacks allowed. And he also talked about, and I think it was today, how important those wide receivers are. He said last year, nobody expected these guys. When you think about those freshmen, for example, that came out of nowhere, he said that they outperformed. Well, now we know they can perform. And so as a consequence, what he said, I thought was really great. Now they know they have to be the ones that win games. And we have to improve our ability to pass the ball, and we've got to go vertical. And he also said something that's very important. We need backup at tight end. And he said, that's what the portal's for. If guys don't step up and are the backups on tight end, he said over the summer, we're going to have to look for it. He didn't say they would. We may have to look for it. And I'll close with this. He was really high on Nico Marchiol. Yeah. He said you can see the progression in his maturity to the point now he's asking the right questions. He's making the right moves. And he said, that's really important because we have to have two quarterbacks that are really efficient. We need to complete more passes, higher percentage, and we need to go downfield. And we have to have two quarterbacks because, you never know what's going to happen. But I'll tell you what, go on YouTube, look for his press conferences. For me, they're almost like lectures. He doesn't lecture you, but he presents it in a very thoughtful, concise, organized way. Very impressed.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense when you listen to him. And I'm like you. I liked it when he said, somebody had asked him, what holes do you have to fill? Are you finding any holes you have to fill? And he said, I'll be able to better judge that at the end of spring practice. He said, but for example, we got some tight ends. If they step up and can do the job, then we're okay there. If they can't, we're going to go find some that can until they get ready. So, basically, not necessarily just the tight ends, but I think he was making the point that if a position, they don't have people to back up in positions and that sort of thing, they're going to go find those people, and which I thought was good. So, again, it shows his grip on the portal, going to use it to get needs and not necessarily just glamour, the big name players. But I'm like you. Yeah, he just he praised Nico. And he's been talking a lot about Nico. And I've read several articles from the writers up here who go to practice, that sort of thing. What a big step he has taken in his game. And his body looks better, bigger, stronger, throwing the ball better, got a better grip on the offense. So, yeah, that's encouraging to know, that you got that person there as, potential starter, and if not, great backup. Mickey, what's your thoughts?
Well, I had an opportunity to listen to his most recent press conference, and there are three things that I think he basically honed in on that are going to be keys to our success in the fall. And from what he's saying in the press conferences, I think he's very satisfied with the way things are coming along in those three areas. The first one, obviously, is going to be, the revamped offensive line. And I think, I'm not just saying that because I played on the offensive line, but it's a key part of any football team. If you don't have the horses up front with the speed, with the agility, with the mental acuity to deliver on the plays that have been called, and you're going to be in big trouble. So I think, one key in that regard is going to be how good of a job does Brandon Yates do of replacing Zach Frazier. They've moved him over from tackle to make a center out of him. And since Zach did go down and wasn't available for the Duke's Mayonnaise Bowl, Brandon did get to play center in that game and did very, very well. But, the center on the offensive line is a lot like the quarterback is in terms of his compatriots on the offensive line. But you got to keep in mind, too, that one of the things he pointed out is that we have about 7 returning starters from the offensive line who didn't start every game, but have a lot of playing experience. Now, that offensive line, last year, and again, Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we led the Big 12 in rushing offense last year with about 229 yards per game. If my memory serves correctly, 229, 230 per game. And we led the league in the fewest number of sacks allowed in the Big 12 last year. Of course, I think that might be a function of the fact that we were primarily a run-centered game rather than, passing centered game, which, brings me to the second point is, and Greg, you mentioned it here, the receiving core. There's going to be a lot of pressure on those guys this year, I think, because last year, Hudson Clement totally came out of nowhere, was a walk-on, got to scholarship for his performance. Rodney Gallagher, Traylon Ray, those guys, nobody expected them to perform at the level in which they performed last year. This year, they're going to have a target on their back. They're going to be, defensive secondary cornerbacks that know who they are now, and they're going to be a lot more familiar and working a lot harder to defend them. So you've got that receiving core. Plus, you got the kid from Oklahoma State to transfer it in too, Jalen Bray. And it looks like he's going to be a leader of that group. At least he's, everything I've seen or read, he's stepped up as the leader of the receiving core in that transfer end position they made. And then you have another kid from right there in Morgantown that played a little bit last year, but they're expecting big things out of him. He's doing very well in spring practice. His name is Preston Fox out of Morgantown High.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he's going to be a player, buddy. And I saw another press conference where they said he's put on about 15 pounds over the offseason through the weightlifting program. So I'm looking for big things from him, which brings me to my third and final point here. One of the things that really gave me a lot of pride and a lot of pleasure in listening to that press conference was when Neal started talking about the number of homegrown players that he wanted to have on the team from the state of West Virginia. Now, being from Mount Hope, West Virginia myself, I have a natural interest in, well, who do we have playing from within the state? And Coach Brown said, his goal was to have 25% of the players, or about 20 of the 80 players on scholarship on the team representing West Virginia. And I did a little research on that, Frank, since we're Mountaineer Locker Room then and now. Your buddy Bob Herzl wrote an article about this a couple of weeks ago. He went back and did some research. Last year in one game, we had 6 starters playing, and it may have been the Duquesne game. I forget which one it was, but 6 of the starters in that one game all came from within the state of West Virginia. Now, the last time that we had that number of starters that came from almost heaven was back in 1954, back when there was a 1 platoon system. So players played they played defense and they played offense. They played both ways. And I'm proud to say that in the 60s era, and Frank, coming from a then and now era, our 1969 team had 8 players from the state of West Virginia who started on that team. There were 3 on offense and there were 5 on defense. And it's been that long since there's been that number of players. Even during the Don Nalen era, I think the most West Virginians that started in any one particular game was 3. And with Rodriguez, it was either 3 or 4. So, I like Neal's philosophy. And I think it does so much, to instill the pride in the team and the interest in all of the West Virginia Mountaineers that follow the team. So I think those three areas are going to be key to how things come out, in the fall. And I'll just finish with this. I did listen to another press conference from this new outside linebackers coach, Victor Cabral. Boy, is he an impressive guy. I tell you, I had not heard him speak before. And he came from the other team whose moniker is the Mountaineers. Anybody want to guess who that is? Appalachian State Mountaineers. Appalachian State. And boy, he's been in coaching for about 17 years. He and Coach Brown had a relationship prior to him being in Appalachian State when Coach Brown was at Troy. And actually, Victor, kind of well known down here in the Atlanta area because he was also a coach at Georgia Southern previously before he moved on to Appalachian State. And there's one of the outside linebackers that he has a relationship with and has had a relationship with from his high school days. So they were kind of reunited, him coming on as the outside linebacker coach. So a lot of good things happening during the spring ball, and Coach Brown certainly sounds satisfied with everything the way it's going so far.
And I would add, I was going to add to it, Mick, is that you're talking about Preston Fox. He's not only put on weight, but he's faster. He said in today's press conference they timed him, and he's increased his speed. He said he has a lock. He's our punt returner. They're still searching for a kick returner. He also mentioned a young man, I didn't know the name, Austin Brinkman. He said he believes he's the best long snapper in the country. And he also mentioned another name that I wasn't up on, and that's R.J. Koken, who's the backup kicker because Michael Hayes has been injured. And he said today he had a 46-yarder because they had a practice, they had a quasi scrimmage today. And so, you tick off the boxes, Greg. That's what's impressive about this. He's got this 360, and as you said also, Mick, he's surrounded himself with really good coaches, and he's structuring this. He said, we're trying to keep the weekends open, which loads the week up for practices, so that, she said the morale's gone up because the players know they're not going to have to come in on the weekends, and neither are the coaches. And so I'm just impressed, period.
Yep. Yeah, and I know, back up what Mickey said, the offensive line, of course, is the key, always is the key. And I think listening to him talk about his offensive line, he sounds very positive about that offensive line. And I think like you said, tickled to death. I think we're headed in the right direction. And we had, we've been talking about transfers, portal, that sort of thing. Frank, you did an interview with Randy Flinchum there a week or so ago. He stays up on the portal. He watches it, knows the transfers in and out. He knows it all about that. So we're gonna cue you up and let you go ahead and get Randy's interview up. We'll listen to that and come back and talk a little bit about that after you get it up.
Okay, bear with me as I bring this up.
I thought Mickey was going to sing and dance while we.
It would be good because I have no way of hiding this. But let's see how quickly I can bring this.
Yeah,
up.
I know. I was trying to drag it out.
That's right. Keep on talking. Keep on talking.
For those who don't know, Frank, while you're bringing it up there, I might mention.
It's always a pleasure to see my good friend Randy Flinchum.
Yeah, Randy
from Virginia, played ball at West Virginia, offensive lineman. Tackle, I think, is the right way, at least the way that Randy describes it, and how he really does follow Mountaineer football really, really carefully, looking at personnel and so on. And we've had him on the show before talking about recruiting, both portal and through the high school route. And he's been watching spring practice very well and how the guys are doing. And so, Randy, we're pleased to have you with us again, buddy.
All right, Frank. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Anytime you get a chance to talk about WVU football, it's a good thing. I just had some remarks about spring ball and some things. We got to remember first, though. What you're hearing from me is opinion and speculation, just from what I've read and been able to pick up on them, what they've been announcing there in Morgantown. One thing to remember too is they're just now starting into pads this week. So most comments coming out of the football program up there have been really concerning guys' movement, who's in shape, who's strong, and all that type thing. One thing to remember too is we lost, let's say, 6 players of consequence from last year. Some guys that transferred out. Mike Lockhart was a nose tackle. He transferred to SU. Hershey McLaurin, safety, played quite a bit. He transferred to Houston. Jared Bartlett, who had been an on and off starter at least the last 2 years, transferred to Cincinnati. James Hurd, who the coaches really liked and they felt was going to be an outstanding player, as a true freshman, transferred to Syracuse. Justin Johnson, running back for the last 3 years, has not hit the school yet, has not found a school yet in the portal.
Surprising.
Yeah. Well, I talked to some other guys and they thought he might be holding out for a little more money or waiting until after spring and see who really needs one. And then Tomiwa Durajai, who came to us last year from Kentucky, has transferred to Miami, Florida there. So we lost 5 defensive guys who played quite a bit.
Yeah.
And one running back. And that ties right in, I think, Frank, to the portal transfers that came in. One guy that they've really talked quite a bit about is a young man named Jaden Bray. He's a wide receiver, 6'2", 200. He's from Oklahoma State. Scored a touchdown against us last year. He caught 48 passes and for 686 yards and had 4 TDs. And he's really impressive with yards after the catch. They feel he's really explosive, and it's going to be that's the only transfer addition to the wide receiver room. Most all the other transfers are defensive guys. You can see there on the chart you have. We lost our starting 2 corners this year in Malachi and Beanie. And we brought in 4 transfers besides high school kids. Aiden Garnes came in from Duquesne, and they saw him play last year and liked him, and I guess went out and got him. TJ Crandall is a kid from Colorado State. It's a tall corner who played quite a bit for Colorado State last year. And a young man named Garnet Hollis is another corner who transferred in from Northwestern. Plus, a young man that you're quite high on from last year who was hurt and didn't play is Montre Miller. So we've got 4 new corners coming in to compete with the guys that are already there. So, I mean, you can see that there's a definite trend to defensive players that we brought in through the transfer portal. I know there's a couple of defensive lineman transfers that the coaches have talked about quite highly. A young man named TJ Jackson, an outside linebacker, Ty French, who transferred here from Gardner Webb, and I guess that would take care of those 2. And an offensive line that came up from Jacksonville State, who's originally from South Charleston. We wanted him as a preferred walk-on. He went to Jacksonville State, played for Rich Rodriguez down there. Was coached by Rick Trickett. and he really came on. Has really changed his body since high school, and they're just super high on Xavier Bowsley. Again, he's an in-state kid and a guy that's that they feel really has a chance. So that's 9 transfers right there that are coming in, mostly on defense. And then you throw that in with, we have 6 freshmen, true freshmen, kids who were in high school first semester, who are there in the program now. And almost all of them are defensive players too. The outside linebacker, Obina Onwuka. We got a defensive tackle named Elijah Kisler, a defensive tackle named Nate Gabriel, 2 safeties, Zach Jennings from Cincinnati and Israel Boyce, and a young tight end named Jack Samarco. Now, they're really high on Zay Jennings. I talked to someone up in Morgantown there, and they felt like out of all the freshmen in the program right now, that Jennings might be a standout, the guy that they felt could really be a player. Tell right there. One thing I'm really excited about with the Mountaineers too is we've got some young linebackers who can really move well. We brought in a linebacker, an inside linebacker from Ohio State, from Ironton, Ohio, named Reed Carrico. He's a big guy, 6'2", 230. They feel that he moves well. He played mostly special teams at Ohio State for his first 2 years. Decided to come to us and see what he could do with the Mountaineers. Then we got 2 guys that got hurt last year. Trey Latham and Josiah Trotter are both coming back, and hopefully all healed up and ready to go there. And those guys, along with Ben Cutter, who started most of the year for us at linebacker, we've got 4 young linebackers that can move. I think last year Koba handled things pretty well straight at him, but lateral movement was not his forte. He was a tough guy and a good linebacker, but these guys here can move, and they've got pretty decent size too there. So you take 4 young linebackers, and I think linebacker used to be a weakness, but I don't think it will be. This coming year. Again, a lot of it is just who the heck and who's going to be there, and who's not. We've got 5 players that are out, let's say, for the spring. I know Asani Redwood, defensive end, our tight end, Cole Taylor, and a starting offensive guard, Tomas Rematch, are all out due to surgery. I think Taylor and Rematch had shoulder surgery. I'm not sure what happened to Redwood. And there's 2 guys, Orion Fisher and Jairo Fabris. Fabris is a linebacker, and Fisher's a defensive end, that are also going to be out from the spring, recovering from surgery there. So I'm pretty darn excited about our football team next year. I know I'm going to have to put my glasses on and read your poster there or whatever. Guys that'll sit out the spring, limited during the spring, C.J. Donaldson, but we've got some young running backs that's going to give an opportunity to. Now C.J. will be working; he'll be working during the spring, but I think he's going to be on a limited basis, so he'll be ready to go in the fall. I'll tell you this: if CJ didn't get his butt in gear now, Braylon Anderson, they really like. He's really changed his attitude and is coming back a lot better. And then Jaheim White are guys that'll give him some competition. And there's 2 freshmen coming in too. So let's hope CJ gets well and gets his mind right and comes back and gets after it. I know Bryce Briggs, an offensive guard, also is a young man who's going to be limited during the spring, that they like and that they hope he'll be ready to go by next year. Out of all, I was reading a publication, out of all of our transfers, one thing I saw is that they felt that rather than Jaden Bray, they felt that Ty French, the young outside linebacker, defensive end type guy from Gardner Webb, was really the most outstanding guy that most outstanding transfer that we had signed. I'm really anxious to get up there in the spring, get on the sideline, and I love just stand beside these guys and give them the eye test. I was a 216-pound offensive tackle, and these guys are 316 pounds.
That's right.
A lot of things have changed in the last 50 years or so, right?
Yeah. I'm thinking as you were talking about that, your summary there, Randy, that what a difference a year makes. When you think about the commentary on the Mountaineers last year at this time, particularly with the predictions coming out that Mountaineers would be 14th in the last in the Big 12, and totally different this year. But as we talked about last week on the show, if you think about what Coach Brown's saying and what he's doing, really, you can see that it's building and it's building and building, and can't think of a more important opening game not only from a program building perspective, but from a national perspective at Penn State in late August. So I think by the time we get into August, it's going to be Katie bar the door, so to speak.
Oh, I agree. And it seems like there's just last year, golly, it was almost we dread the season type thing. Are we going to be any good or not? And now, the attitude, I think, of the team too is much more positive. Everybody's, I think, on the same page. I think the state feels that way too. I haven't heard anything about season ticket sales yet, but I bet they'll be a lot better for this year. Got a great 7 home games, great home schedule too. I'm excited about Mountaineer.
Well, thank you. I'm excited about having you on the program, and we're going to have you back again. Particularly, you're going to be up there for the spring game and also for a couple of games during the season, Randy. We really appreciate your taking the time to be with us. A lot of insights there. Any final comments?
Well, I'm holding out for my NIL money, Frank, but I'll be glad to come back for sure here.
Yeah, no, all we do is $25 a month meal money. You got to make that last the entire month.
Hey, I was used to that in college. That's what we had.
No. Thanks, Randy. Really appreciate it. You take care, buddy.
All right. Always a pleasure.
Like hearing Randy talk about that. He pays attention, knows what's going on. And while he was talking, I was flipping through some things on the internet, and I saw a reporter that was at practice today had some video of some of the throws they were making, catches, and his comment on there was, "This wide receiver group is for real." That's encouraging to hear that too. And but I like Randy's take. It makes me feel more encouraged about the defense. Listen to I forgot about some of those guys he mentioned that will be back, that played a ton of football last year, and I think that's encouraging from a defensive side as well as the offensive side. And I think just looking, you look at our offense, we've got plenty of running backs, good running backs, quarterbacks obviously solid. I think there's a update on the baseball game 1-1. I don't know what inning we're in or anything like that, but anyway, but then you start looking at the defense. They seem really high on these linebackers and the secondary. And I know early on, Coach Brown talked about the depth that they had at those positions. And you look at some of those names, like at linebacker, a lot of familiar names on there that are back. And then we've added a couple that really look like are going to be good football players.
Yeah. And, the thing that Coach Brown talked about today was he said, the mountain to climb on linebackers was much more difficult than they had anticipated. It was very, very difficult. And he said, that's an area and when you think about it, and of course you played the game, Mickey, how important that offensive line and the linebacking is. When you think of the two squads, you can't have weak linebackers, you can't have a weak offensive line. So, we were talking before we taped, is like, we can't believe what a difference it is from outright enthusiasm to last year. Oh boy, can we win
Just
again?
feels different. Just feels different, don't it?
Yeah.
Well, you know, you look at the linebackers. You talk about the mountain to climb to get those linebackers. You know, the linebacking position. I know Mickey will know this, and I'm sure you do too, Frank. But that position's changed so much over the last 10, 15 years. You know, it used to be you had big, great big, strong, tough guys. 6'5", 240. Those were your linebackers. You know, you had. Of course, losing his name right now while I'm talking, but now you got to have linebackers that can cover people, and not only cover but get up in there and make tackles as well. So it's a changed position.
Yeah,
I know Mickey knows that, and Mickey, you can speak more to Frank's comment.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day when Randy and I played, by the way, Randy was just a superior offensive tackle for us. Great guy all around. It's good to see him again. Stay in touch with him. But, primarily the defenses that people used to run, back in the day were stop the run first and force them into passing. And today it's changed completely around. As I happen to play all three interior line positions while in my time at WVU, I was at center 1 year, guard 1 year, and tackle the next. So that transition can be made as far as what your blocking assignment is, but getting to that person, is a real key. The defense that the other team is running has got a lot to do with it. A lot of back in the day used to be a lot of 5-men fronts where you had a middle guard and you had the two nose tackles and you had the two defensive ends. Today, people play more of a 4-4-3 sort of arrangement where you got two inside linebackers, two outside linebackers, and three guys back there. Well, two corners and safety. So yeah, it's changed tremendously. You got to be, those guys today have got to be, well, as they used to say, agile, hostile, and mobile.
Mobile, yeah. And Mickey, I started laughing there just now because I was thinking of linebackers. One of the names, of course, so Fayette County guy, Mount Hope guy, Lonnie Warwick, and I was interviewing Lonnie one time for my show, and I brought up that, I brought up the point, top of the seventh. It's a 1-1 the baseball game. I brought up the point about linebackers back in the day being big and, strong and powerful and heavy. And today they got to be quicker and cover receivers out of the backfield, that sort of thing. And Lonnie corrected me real quick and told me how fast he was when he was playing in the NFL. I was like, I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about other linebackers. Didn't want to upset him. And speaking of Fayette County guys, again, while Randy was talking, I look at Twitter at some of those comments, and I rolled down on a friend of mine that posted the first pitch at tonight's baseball game between WVU and Marshall was thrown out by another Fayette County boy, Courtney Jackson, the new basketball coach at Marshall. So,
all right.
Cool. Courtney played at Oak Hill High School, and he's from Oak Hill. He's taking the reins as the new basketball coach down at Marshall. So had him throwing out the first pitch. And I can see why he's basketball coach after watching that pitch. But I shouldn't criticize her because I probably couldn't throw it to the plate. I don't imagine unless I threw it underhand. If I threw it overhand, I'd be injured. One last thing before we close shop. Last week, Eric, come through on the news while we were on the air that there had been a proposal by some I don't know if presidents, ADs, what it was, excuse me, to create a super conference, I guess you'd call it, in football. And they talked about an 80 team. They've talked about a 70 team big conference and divide them up into divisions. And Frank, you said an interesting graphic for me to look at. I'm not going to put you on the spot and say put that up there because you may not have it handy, but yeah, there it is.
There it is.
That would be the conference that West Virginia would be in. And if you look at that, sure brings back some memories. Look at the old Big East right there. It'd be very formidable. But basically what they're talking about is putting together this, and I had mentioned this, I think, I forget who we had on talking about the conferences and the alignments and all that. I had mentioned that, it looks like it's headed toward an NFL model. And basically that's what this is. You have divisions in different parts of the country. and those divisions within the divisions. Then you have conferences, like the North, the South, whatever, and then you play it off down to a Super Bowl, if you will. And that's been the proposal. And the one thing they did mention in there, and I've heard this mentioned a lot, and I think this is going to happen regardless of whether or not we have a super conference or if we have, 4 power conferences, whatever the case may be. They talked about collective bargaining with the players. And I think that's something that's coming for sure. Again, I hope these schools, these athletic directors, presidents, NCAA, which I know won't be prepared, I hope they are prepared for that when it's coming, because that's coming. And, there's a lot of, a lot of stuff that has to happen to get all this organized. But I think everyone has seen, especially in football, the disparity that this NIL and all this can create. I think in basketball it's different. I've talked about that before. I'm not going to go over it again. I think it's created parity in basketball. But I think in football, because of the number of people you have to have, I think that gap's going to get wider, wider, wider. And your haves are going to continue to have, and your have-nots are going to be struggling. And so something like this is coming. I mean, I don't think they're all dumb enough to say, well, let's just play it out here and make the most money we can possibly make. Forget about these other people, because they all depend on each other. You can't have good conferences if you don't have good teams everywhere.
Yeah, you did a great summary there, Greg. Here's the thing, though, that I think and it came out in the articles we read, and the viewers may know this, but if they don't, in this proposal, which is coming from university executives, not the NCAA, it's coming from presidents and chancellors. They would do away with the conferences. There would be no more Power 4. There would be one commissioner over. In fact, I'll throw this up so that you can see it. It would be a super league because of the fact that the conferences wouldn't be involved. There would be this super league like the NFL, as Greg said. And what they're proposing, and by the way, I should mention that the graphic you saw with West Virginia, that's a scenario from the Athletic. What the presidents and chancellors, smart as they are, didn't propose who would be in the divisions. They didn't, because there'd be just people would go just focus on that. So the Athletic did. But the basic structure is this. There would be 7 10-team divisions comprised of Power 5 schools plus Notre Dame. You can't be an independent anymore. So you have to be in a division. And then there would be one 10-team division comprised of group of 5 teams. And if anybody follows Premier Soccer in England, the British Premier League, they have a thing called relegation. In other words, based on performance, teams can float into a division or out of it, into the Premier League or out of it, into it if they're playing really well and they have a good record at lower level, and they can go out of it if they basically lose their standing. And so there are 50 teams that would be part of this Super League, but only 10 of them would be in a division. The others would be sort of teams in waiting. And I can give some examples of that. Actually, I can talk about it now if I can pull out my notes here. The teams in that 8th division would come from the American, the Mid-American, the Sun Belt, the Mountain West, and Conference USA. So that would be teams like Tulane, Toledo, Jacksonville State, Coastal Carolina. But what I love about this is that it is back to the future. And, all of us have this great taste for history. And this would be going back in time. And the thing I love about this, again, the conferences are fighting this. The only conference that even would meet with the committee that came up with this was the ACC, and the ACC is in trouble. Anyway, so there would be what the Athletic is proposing is you have an ACC conference with all the original members from the 1950s, and that includes Maryland. And believe it or not, South Carolina used to be in the ACC. They got pissed off at the ACC with respect to grading practices, academic qualifications. So they bolted for the SEC. Then you would have the Big East as the athletic, as they're laying it out, with WVU included. And can you imagine what the crowd would be like at Mountaineer Field when Notre Dame rolls into town? That would be unbelievable. Then you've got the Big Ten from 1995. Penn State was never in the Big East. A lot of people have forgotten that or never knew. Penn State would remain in the Big Ten, but Northwestern would leave. And then you would have the old Big Eight, 6 of the original schools like Kansas, Kansas State, Iowa State, plus Northwestern, and then several of the teams that are now in the Big 12 or will be, they're in the Big 12 or will be in the Big 12 with Utah. And then you've got the Pac-10, the original 8 plus Arizona and Arizona State. Those 10 teams made the Pac-10. And then, and a lot of folks probably don't even know there was a Southwest Conference back in the day, which included Texas, Texas A&M, Arkansas, those teams, and all the original members of the Southwest Conference except Rice. Baylor was in the Southwest Conference. Texas Tech was in the Southwest Conference. Then they left for the Big 12, Big 8 and Big 12. Plus Oklahoma State. So OU and OSU would be together again. So it would include Texas, Arkansas, and A&M. And then the SEC would be the original members of the SEC from the 1930 before all the expansions. So no Missouri. Missouri would be in what's called the Big 8. Now again, the Athletic is playing around with this, but the beautiful thing about this proposal is that it brings back regional competition.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Yep,
that's what I was going to say. You know, that's one thing that is very appealing, I'm sure, to fans out there. I know when I saw it and I saw the division that we were in, I thought that's perfect. And looking at it from a team standpoint, a school standpoint, you'd have to be thrilled with the idea of knowing, you're going to have these regional rivalries come back to life, and those things generate money. And I think the TV networks would get behind this as well, because that would be huge. I mean, you start to get these rivalries going again, and those are the games that people watch. And if you you look at any ratings things where they show how many people viewed games, you look at Michigan, Ohio State. Well, that's what everybody watches, And I know we had talked about it before that people are going to have to pay these streaming services to watch games. And you and I talked, Frank, about what the games. Would you pay to watch? Say Rutgers and Purdue play football? Probably not. But if it's Michigan, Ohio State, you're going to pay to watch it. So it's clear that these rivalry games are huge, and they're huge money makers for the TV networks standpoint. They're great viewership. And I just think that from a fan's perspective, this is an awesome idea, because I think the fan bases are getting kind of tired of all this jumping around, changing conferences. I think the fan base is getting weary of that. And I just think this is a good idea. I know a lot of people don't want to see it to go that way. Well, that's just like the NFL. Well, yes, it is. But we're in an era where people are getting paid to play, basically, and we might as well embrace it and try to figure out which the best way to do it.
That's right. And I think, Mick, before you share your thoughts, and I would like to hear them, this would be 130 teams with one commissioner, 130. So there would be 80 teams that would be in the game, and another 40 that are always, contending to get in there. So it gives a chance for a team like James Madison to really show its stuff and be rewarded for it. A team like Coastal Carolina, and it doesn't exclude anybody. So the Northwesterns, the Vanderbilts, they're in it. They're not excluded. But let's face it. The big stumbling blocks have names. Big Ten and SEC will fight against this.
Yeah,
fight against this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think another thing.
100%.
Another thing the fans would like about it, me included, is this would take away that who's number 17, who's number 16 going to get in, who's number 13 going to get in, Florida State getting left out because they're undefeated and one, et cetera, et cetera. I think it would eliminate that. And, you play the games. You play in your conference, your division, you win your division or get a wild card or whatever it is you get, you advance. If you lose, you're out. And I think people are okay with that. Give us a chance. We want to play. And I think it would eliminate some of this objective selection of these teams.
That's right.
Mickey,
and
sorry.
In a 16-team playoff.
Right. Ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I love the regional rivalry aspect of it. It brings back what we all grew up with. It saves money for the university in terms of travel expense for the teams and to get all the way out to the West Coast and play one weekend. And it saves money most of all for the fans that want to go see their team play. In the Big 12 right now, I think our closest away game is like 712 miles away. So, that just doesn't make sense when you think about it. But I love the regional rivalry aspect of it. And I like the fact that you can play in, you can play your way into the system. As Frank mentioned, the structure is somewhat like the European Soccer League. And, finally, I'll just mention that early on in our broadcast, when we first started Mountaineer Locker Room Here and Now, one of our first subjects was conference realignments, if you guys will recall. In the first three shows, we talked about that. And one of the three panelists here, I'm not sure who it was, but one of the three panelists said that they eventually saw something like an NFL model developing out of all of this.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember who that might have been?
I don't remember, but I do remember it being said. Yeah.
And I'll tell you something else too. You talk about fans going to the games. Back when I first got out of college and started working, I had season tickets, and and I love coming to Mountaineer Field watching games. But one of the best times we had, and some of the most enjoyable times, was going to these away games because we could go to Pitt, we could go to Virginia Tech, we could go to Maryland. We could go to all those games. And we had a blast doing that, and we traveled, and Mountaineer Nation traveled, and they'll go to those games, but I can't, and I won't go 700 miles to watch a game, unless somebody's paying me to do it on the Voice of Voice of College Football pays me to go out. I'll go, but yeah, I mean, to me, from a fan's perspective, I think it's awesome. I think it's a great idea, and I'm like Frank, I'm also a realist. I'm like Frank. I know the SEC. And the Big Ten will fight that tooth and nail because they want it all. Basically, they want it all. Well, listen, guys, we are running unbelievably short of time again. I don't know how this happens. We always talk about what we're going to talk about, what we want to fill our time with, and then we start talking. Before you know it, hour and a half's already gone. So we're at that stage of the game, and we see the score has been updated. WVU 2-1, top of the seventh. So we're ahead. So let's go. We get that bullpen cranking tonight. Appreciate you guys, both of you, and your insights. Always fun to sit and talk sports with you folks. And again, the time just flies by whenever we start doing this. It's been a fun night. We've got a lot of good information out there for folks. We hope you enjoyed it. We again want to ask you to like and subscribe on YouTube. That helps us out a great deal. Also, go to the merchandise site and pick up some Voice of College Football merchandise. We do have Mountaineer Locker Room Then and Now shirts on that site. So there it is, and Mountaineer Locker Room Then and Now men's and women's t-shirts available. Frank, you can just leave that up there as we fade away and into the sunset. But speaking of sunset, you guys enjoy the eclipse.
Yeah, down in Florida, there wasn't much. It was 50%.
I was going to say, you probably didn't see much.
What was really a lot of fun was watching the people who were watching the eclipse.
Yeah,
that was the fun part.
Yeah,
we got a pretty good view in Morgantown. It was pretty amazing, really, to watch it through those glasses and to see the little sliver of sun still peeping through. Yeah, pretty neat stuff. All right, guys, we're going to get out of here and sign off for the night.
Okay.
Again, enjoyed talking to both of you. A lot of good information. We look forward to seeing everyone again next Wednesday night here on the Mountaineer Locker Room Then and Now. Greg Crist for Frank Fear and Mickey Plumley. Have a great evening, everybody.
Bye-bye.